the sermon today.
Wrong church.
I forgot it last week, remember? I walked off and left him there. Renee's daughter, Megan, and her best friend Lisa were driving home from the beach one day. It was actually early evening and the dusk was happening. It was May 10th, 2002. Both girls were only 20 years old. They had just finished up their freshman year in college. They were looking forward to a summer of happiness and joy with their part-time jobs. And they were hit by a drunk driver. And both girls were killed instantly. A young man by the name of Eric Smallridge was the drunk driver. He was only 22 and had just graduated from college. He was originally looking forward to a full-time job in his chosen profession. And he really was a good guy. He had just made a bad decision. He'd been drinking most of the afternoon and on into the night and didn't realize how badly he had been affected by the alcohol. Ultimately, Eric was found guilty of a DUI killing and was sentenced to serve 2 11-year terms. Megan's mom went to a place she had never thought she would go. With time, she realized and she was filled with bitterness and hate towards Eric, who had taken her only daughter away. With time, she realized that Eric was a prisoner physically, but she was also a prisoner herself of her thoughts, her anger, and her hate. The anger and hate began to affect her deeply, and she didn't like the bitter woman that she had become since her daughter's death. And she realized that the only way to heal that and to turn her life around was to forgive Eric. Now, I don't know about you, but I think I'd find that really, really hard to do if someone had killed my child. Renee asked for a meeting with Eric, and he granted them. And it was during this meeting that she forgave him for killing her daughter. Eric was stunned and could not believe that someone could forgive him for what he had done, least of all, the dead girl's mother. And as she put it, I couldn't forgive myself, or as he put it, I couldn't forgive myself. How can anyone possibly forgive me for what I did? Renee and Eric began to meet on a regular basis, and she started to speak at schools about drunk driving. And within a few years, Renee and her family and the parents of Lisa went to the judge and requested that Eric's sentence be cut in half. It's called a beggar motion. A total of 11 people showed up for both families, testified before the judge, who said he had never, ever experienced anything like that in his 11 years being on the bench. Ultimately, the judge cut Eric's sentence in half from 22 years to 11. In addition to that, the prison authorities began to let him appear with Renee at speaking engagements about drunk driving as the driver. Forgiveness, indeed, is the hardest thing to give away. Why? Because for a lot of people, it's easier to live in the past than it is to live in the present moment. It's easier to stay angry and hateful rather than opening up to love when someone has harmed you. Forgiveness is discovering the freedom within by loving the unlovable. Let me repeat that. Forgiveness is discovering the freedom within by loving the unlovable. So why is forgiveness so important? Why do you think forgiveness is so important?
Freedom.
Freedom. Freedom of what?
Guilt, living in the past.
Anger,
Anger. What else?
fear,
Fear.
resentment,
I didn't hear that.
resentment,
Resentment.
Judgment.
Judgment.
shame.
Shame. Absolutely shame. Once there were two brothers who owned adjoining farms, and no one knows how it ever happened or why, but at some point in their lifetime, their adjoining farms, there was bitterness and conflict, and they stopped talking and stopped working together on their farms. And one morning, the elderly brother John, he opened up the back door to discover a man was standing there with his toolbox and said, you know, I've got a few days to work. Do you have any small job that I could do for you? John replied, why, yes, I do. And he pointed at the creek and he said, you see that dang creek? My brother made that creek. It used to be a pretty meadow, but he put a hole in the levee and dug it out, and he made this stupid creek. I want you to take all those boards over there and build an 8-foot fence so I don't have to look at it anymore. He probably did it just to spite me. I'm going to do him one better, though, because you're going to build a fence for me so I don't even have to see him anymore. The carpenter indicated that he understood, and so John went on his way to run some errands into town. And when the farmer left on his errand, when he returned at sunset, he discovered that it was a completely different project than what he had given the directions to the man to do. The carpenter saw that he had built a bridge. And with that, he noticed that his brother was coming across the bridge toward him, and they met halfway on the bridge. And the younger brother, Tom, embraced John and said, you are so incredible to build a bridge after all I've said and done. Thank you for forgiving me. When we forgive, we open a greater space within ourselves that can be filled with love and kindness and care towards others. Forgiveness allows us to return to our true essence, which is love. We are love. Ernest Holmes says, if we hold a grudge, we bar ourselves from the highest expression of our divine nature. God never hates, nor does God hold feelings of bitterness towards anyone. Thus, the grudge holder is trying to express God in something else which is impossible. Spirit is not cut up into little segments. No one can say, I will accept God's healing, but I will not express God's love. Since spirit is indivisible, the person who refrains from expressing God's love will be unable to accept God's help. Therefore, we should express love, for love is the fulfillment of the law. We have known for many years that our mental attitude and thought process also has a profound effect upon our physical condition. We need only follow the writings of Louise Hay to know that the heart issues are feelings of hurt and resentment and anger. Liver issues are about not forgiving ourselves or someone else. Dry eyes indicate we are refusing to forgive. There are so many connections between our physical health and our mental process that are affected by forgiveness. Want to live a healthier life? Remember to forgive. Often what we need to forgive in others is something in our own being that we have refused to heal, examine, or hidden from. I love Gerald Jampowski in his book, Forgiveness, the greatest healer of all, states, "To forgive is to feel the compassion, the gentleness, the tenderness, and the caring that is always within our hearts." We can look upon forgiveness as a journey across an imaginary bridge from a world where we are always recycling our anger to a place of peace. That journey takes us into our own spiritual essence and the heart of God. Would you rather feel compassion, or would you rather suffer? I don't know about you, but that's a pretty easy choice. Remember, forgiveness is discovering the freedom within by loving the unlovable. And I'll never forget one day I was coming out of the police department, and there was a bicycle laying on the ground and like a cart behind it. And I ran back in and I said, "Do we know who this belongs to?" And they said, "Oh yeah, that belongs to Harry, and he's looking for a bungee cord." And so I went, "I have a bungee cord." So I went and I got the bungee cords out of my truck, and I looked all around for him, and all of a sudden here comes this guy with dreadlocks. And obviously he had not had a bath in a very long time. And I lined up the 3 cords that I had, and I said, "Which one would you like? I'll be glad to give you a cord." And he picked the one that he wanted, and he said, "Thank you," and he grabbed me and hugged me. And I couldn't resist. That was the only way he knew to express gratitude. We have to be willing to love the unlovable. And when we make that choice, that decision to forgive, it's like melting an iceberg that has lived far too long in our heart and opens us up to a new way of being. When we can find a multitude of reasons to not forgive, if I'm weak if I forgive somebody. When I don't forget, I believe I can control you. And when we don't forgive, we keep a distance between ourselves and the person that hurt you. In essence, it is our ego that is getting in the way of preventing us from moving to that place of forgiveness of the other individual. When we refuse to forgive and push away love, we are coming from a place of ego and fear. Our ego loves to give us all the reasons why that we shouldn't forgive if we want to live a peaceful, loving, and compassionate life. We must be willing to release the obstacles that prevent us from forgiving another person. Our first step is to let go of the belief that we must find somebody to blame when something goes wrong in our life. When we move to that place of blame, we often find ourselves clinging to the anger and to the guilt and to the shame. I can't believe either the Democrats and the Republicans. To the Republicans, it's the Democrats' fault that we're in a crisis. To the Democrats, it's the Republicans that are in the crisis. We're constantly looking for someone to blame, and yet it doesn't solve anything. That's a heavy load to carry. Blame does not bring us happiness. It only serves to imprison us in negative thought patterns. The next step is to let go of fear. Often we project onto others what we perceive to be true and real in our lives. Things that happen to us in childhood that are deep within our consciousness and subconsciousness haunt us. And so often those deep thoughts based on childhood experiences become adulthood fears. And those fears become our realities. We become convinced that our uncomfortable thoughts and feelings are caused by everybody else. It's not my fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. Logically, we know that this is not true. Emotionally, however, we don't want to let go of the past. We want to keep it repeating or recreating it into something more happy, more loving and kind. So often we stay attached to the past because it's what we are familiar with. As a police chaplain, I often go with officers on rides, and especially to those when it's spousal abuse is transpiring. And when we offer a place to go that is safe for the women or the men from this difficult place in life, they will often return to someone physically, mentally, and emotionally demeans them. I used to be stunned by that and wonder why. And then I finally understood. They knew what to expect. They knew what would happen, and to leave was the unknown, creating fear. It was easier to stay with the abuser. Because we have the power to choose our thoughts, our next step means letting go of the thoughts that no longer serve us. Love returns when we shift how we think or how we're willing to forgive others. In his book on forgiveness, Dr. Jim Plowski writes about his own transformation. He openly admits that he truly was not a nice person, not only to others, but to himself as well. He states that his ego was on autopilot, and when attacked, heaven help whoever was in his way. After 20 years of marriage, he divorced his wife, Pat. He felt guilty and hostility and self-blame, and then he found alcohol. 2 years later, he discovered A Course in Miracles, and life began to shift for him. His struggle with blame and guilt and shame began to release. Every day he concentrated on seeing his ex-wife, Pat, in light and love. He asked God for help in forgiving himself and his ex-wife. Soon he noticed the tension between the two of them that was once there began to melt away. Ultimately, they became good friends. And as Jim Plowski put it, I surrendered to love rather than to fear. So just what is yours to do with forgiveness? In Proverbs 17:9, it states, "He who forgets an offense seeks friendship, but he who hates to forget an offense estranges himself with a friend and a neighbor." It's important for us to go deep and look within why we're not forgiving. Maybe you thought you had forgiven someone, but the residue still remains there. 10 years ago, I walked the Camino in Spain for the first time. At the same place, at some place on the journey, I realized that while I thought I had forgiven the individuals that were involved with my dismissal from my last city job, I truly hadn't completely released them. So one night I made a list of everyone involved. It was about 21 people. And I was very surprised because it was so long, longer than I had anticipated, and how long I had carried that anger. And then I began my process of forgiveness. I had a rosary in my hands. And in each bead, I would say my forgiveness prayer. It went like this: I forgive you, John, for all that you have done. I love you, John, as I love myself. God's the love that I am. And for every single person on that list, I did that over several days. Some of them I had to do 2 or 3 times, like the mayor. Can't understand that one at all. By the time I had completed the list, I was free of an experience that had occurred 24 years before. It was so freeing. and I felt the burden had been lifted from my heart. So the first thing you can do is to make a list of people who maybe you need to forgive. Remember, forgiveness is the discovering the freedom within by loving the unlovable. If you're unable to forgive the individual personally because they are deceased, you can always write a letter to them, or you can light a candle and have a conversation. You are choosing to not be a victim anymore. Many of us may remember the San Francisco earthquake of 1989. You thought I was going to say 1906. There was a family who had their home totally destroyed in the earthquake. And they wanted to stay in the Bay Area, but they didn't want to continue to live in San Francisco. So they selected a home across the bay in Oakland in the hills. And a few years later, a fire destroyed their home again in the Oakland hills. They honored their feelings and forgave what seemed to happen to them. Rather than staying victims, they moved on with their lives. There will always be natural disasters. Asking why doesn't help us. The answer will never come. Instead, ask what. What can I learn from this situation? What can I do to move forward? What do I need to forgive? Make a decision to live in the present moment, not the past. Henry Landworth survived Auschwitz during World War II. He had seen life at its absolute worst. And he came to America after the war and became a very successful businessman. But his heart was filled with anger and hate for the German government. Because of his business success, he decided to give back to others who were less fortunate. And he began a nonprofit organization called Give the Kids the World. It was all about giving children life-threatening diseases a week of fun with their family at Disney World. His heart was transformed by working with the children. Forgiveness from the Germans finally came. Henry believes it's because of the love that he received from the children and their families. It's time to forgive yourself. Often we are still carrying guilt or shame from something from our childhood. Forgiveness releases us from our self-imposed prison that we have created. Nobody else, just ourselves. Remember, you have the power to choose your thoughts and to stay in the present moment. Be clear that your own intention is love and a peace of mind. When we forgive another person, we're also forgiving ourselves. There's a chorus in a song called Forgiveness is Very Simple. And it goes, forgiveness, 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 forgiveness. Show me how to love the unlovable. Show me how to reach the unreachable. Help me now to do the impossible. Forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. Always remember that forgiveness is discovering the freedom within by loving the unlovable. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is. Amen.
Amen.